I recently did a video about the human design energy of the notorious serial killers Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy. And a lot of things that I realized is that most of them all had a defined emotional solar plexus center. And emotional solar plexus center is responsible for emotional awareness. If people have a defined emotional solar plexus center in their energy, more than likely they have very strong, intense emotions that can go from 0 to 100 extremely quick, and it's easy to be mismanaged. Like these emotions are very intense. And so I'm not saying everyone with a defined emotional solar plexus center will be a violent, angry person. However, these are trends that I noticed in the 4 serial killers that I, just studied a little bit. And I wanted to dive into how the emotional solar plexus center, like imbalances within that, can lead to violence. So I'm Sable Danielle, a human design coach, and let's dive in. Imbalances within the emotional solar plexus center can potentially lead to violence, which we've seen through the comparison of the body graph charts of John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, and Charles Manson. And so in human design, the emotional solar plexus center governs emotional waves. And when these waves aren't properly understood or processed, they can lead to destructive behaviors. So today we're going to dive deeper into how emotional imbalances can contribute to conflict and violence, and why it's crucial to gain emotional clarity and understand your emotions. The emotional solar plexus center is one of the most influential centers in our human design. It's responsible for how we process and express our emotions. It's responsible for emotional awareness, creativity, sensuality, sexuality. In the center, this is where our emotional waves are created. Emotional waves are extreme highs and lows that people experience who have defined emotional solar plexus centers. And this can shape how we respond to things in our life. For people who have a defined emotional solar plexus center, these waves are constant with chaos if they're mismanaged or misunderstood. And so people with an undefined emotional solar plexus center tend to absorb and amplify the emotions of others. And that's because when you have an undefined center, you're taking in and amplifying that energy. And when you have a defined center, you're giving that energy to be taken in and amplified. So that's the difference between the two. But when you have an undefined emotional solar plexus, you're taking in and absorbing energy, and this sensitivity to all of the external emotions around you can lead to emotional confusion about what belongs to you, what doesn't belong to you, and what's influencing your emotions externally. So when you have an emotional solar plexus center that's out of balance, your emotional waves become very overwhelming and intense, and people may struggle to navigate them and understand them. Emotional lows can create feelings of despair and helplessness and feeling lost and angry, like subtle anger, passive aggressiveness type of energy. And then it could be followed by an explosion of anger and sadness in a confrontation or something. So this can also, make people be lost in feelings of just depression, I guess, even anxiety. Emotional highs can generate impulsive and reckless behavior. Many people suppress their emotions because they're uncomfortable with being vulnerable or uncomfortable feeling their emotions, or you don't have the tools to properly express your emotions. This suppression can create a very huge heavy emotional pressure, which is kind of like shaking up pop in a bottle. Like it's eventually going to explode. So when people fail to flow through their emotions and acknowledge their feelings, understand their feelings, recognize that they're there, it can lead to intense emotional outbursts. And that can lead to, fights, violence, murdering someone, cussing someone out, or just a huge emotional blowout. This pattern of suppression can eventually cause huge explosions, and it can be a common cause of violent behaviors because you're holding on to such intense emotions with no outlet. You're not acknowledging those feelings. You're pretending they're not there. You're suppressing them. And then boom, somebody pisses you off, and you either, depending on how much you're able to control your emotions, you cuss them out, you punch them, you slap them, you hurt somebody's feelings, you make an emotional decision, you become violent, or in these serial killers' cases, you murder someone. So it's a bunch of rage and aggression that can stem from, not having a healthy way to balance out your emotions. And imbalance often leads to emotional repression, where your bottled up feelings just don't have a healthy outlet, and it's, boom, a big, massive rage and aggressive moments. Okay, so another critical element of emotional imbalance is misinterpreting your emotions. When someone is riding the low point of an emotional wave, they may see everything around them through like a dark, heavy, toxic lens of frustration, anger, sadness. And this emotional distortion can lead to misunderstandings and conflict. Without understanding your emotional wave, people who act out based off of their temporary emotions and feelings are often misinterpreting external situations as threats or personal attacks or challenges. And this can lead to escalating conflicts where emotions oftentimes spiral out of control, unfortunately. And so there are countless real world examples of how emotional imbalances can lead to violence. I mean, there's a whole show, a whole channel, one of my favorite channels, Investigation Discovery, that's all about crimes and murders. And you can pretty much guess that these all happen because of mismanaged, misunderstood emotions. Heavy, intense emotional imbalances, massive, emotional pressures that were not properly managed. And you can see that in cases of like domestic violence, or what's one of my favorite shows, Fear Thy Neighbor, or Signs of a Psychopath, or whatever. Like all of these things are stemming from emotional imbalances, and we can hopefully try to avoid that by bringing more awareness to our emotions and what we're feeling, and by waiting before we make impulsive emotional decisions. A person who experiences emotional waves who doesn't have the tools to manage their feelings may lash out by hurting the people closest to them. And you see that in these crime shows or these murder shows or whatnot. Most of these people all knew the person that they were murdered by, or the murderer knew their victims, and they lashed out in a moment of intense emotions. And it had devastating consequences, not only to themselves, but to every single person that was impacted by that decision. So how can we balance the emotional solar plexus and avoid these types of destructive patterns? It starts with self-awareness. Learning to recognize emotional waves as temporary feelings can prevent impulsive actions. Doing things like meditating, emotional journaling, therapy, going to a rage room to get out those angry feelings. Go break shit in a room that is meant to be used for that purpose, not on someone you love. Don't take someone's life. Don't hurt someone's feelings emotionally, and don't hurt them physically. Like, let's find healthy outlets for these types of things, so that we can process our emotions in a healthy way. Be patient, ride out the emotional wave, wait for emotional clarity. People who can make better decisions and avoid destructive consequences of unprocessed, intense emotions in that way. Developing emotional intelligence is huge key to breaking the cycle of emotional imbalances that could lead to violence and destructive behavior. So hopefully you can see that the emotional solar plexus imbalances can lead to conflict, anger, frustration, and in some cases violence. But with self-awareness and emotional management and emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, we can learn to ride out these emotional waves without letting them control us, without feeling like we become those emotions and we're victim to those emotions. It's just a temporary moment of feeling that way, but it's not a forever feeling. It doesn't control us. It doesn't own us. It's not who we are. So thank you for watching. If you haven't checked out the serial killer series, check that out. It's linked below, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Don't forget